I'll be going over this layers here. These are the 3D layers. I'm going to be opening up the geometry here for just a second to show you a few things. This mesh here has subdivision levels, and as you can see down here, it's showing subdivision levels by the S divide. The highest one is number 3. I'll be showing you something in case you run into this problem. If I'm not at the highest subdivision level and I come over here, see I toned it down to number 2. If I was to select new from the 3D layer, it's going to tell me this function requires the highest subdivision level. If you get that error, just crank it back up to the highest subdivision level and select new. Then we have this new layer. Automatically the record button comes on, and if I bring my cursor over this layer, you can see the text to the left. It says Untitled Layer S Divide 3. Alright, it's indicating this needs to be on S Divide 3, which is S Divide 3 here, down here in the geometry. If I change this S divide down here in geometry, it will gray out this one up here in layers. So if I bring it down, it's inactive up here in layer. So we'll crank that back up here. Another thing is, when I bring my cursor up here, notice I got the word shape, polypaint, and target mask. For this little demonstration, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to move the slider, and one thing's going to happen is the record's going to deactivate, and I'm going to get some new text up here on the left hand side. So if I just move it and let go, it's telling me now the shape, polypaint, and target mask, now it's got the word empty after there. So let's go ahead and we're going to start with the shape, then work down the list of polypaint and target mask. Let's go ahead and delete this one by this button here, and we are going to create, and we are going to start with shape. What shape is when you deform the mesh, the 3D mesh, and I'm going to go ahead and make a bump right here and make a bump maybe right here, and I bring my cursor over here. You can see the text still says shape, polypaint, and target mask, but once I move it, you notice the shape right here, it does not have the word empty after it, but we have no polypaint and no target mask, so we know that this one here, deform the mesh, is the word shape. We can crank it down to -1 or bring it all the way up to number 1 here. We can hide or show it by this little eyeball icon in the layers. And another thing is, if I go ahead and try editing on this mesh without the record button on, I'm going to get this pop-up, and it's basically trying to tell me I need to turn on the record. So I'm going to make a bump here, and I'll need to select this icon a little bit to the left, and this for some reason automatically puts me in polypaint mode. As you notice, things changed here. If this happens to you, you can go to the subtools, and there's this little paint icon right here, little paintbrush. Well, turn that back off. I don't want to polypaint right now, and I want to add another bump, let's say right here, and maybe another one right here. As soon as I move the slider, the record button will come off, and we have something like that. So since we went over shape, we're going to go over polypaint. Before we do, we're probably best to name this layer here. So we'll name this one here to bump. Press enter. It's probably best not to have long text in here because it cannot handle it very well. So we know this one is bump. Then we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. This is going to be the paint layer. Once again, you can come up here to turn on the polypaint. For some reason, if I turn the record off and turn it back on, automatically in polypaint mode. This may work for you, it may not, but it's working for me. So I want to paint with just paint and no shape. So we'll need to turn off the Z because I don't want no bump. RGB's on because I want to paint with some color. here and paint some red. Now when I move this slider here, you can see it's doing the opacity to the poly paint. If we look at the text now, you can see on this layer it has poly paint, but the shape is empty and the target mask is empty because we didn't do no shape on this layer or target mask. So we'll need to go ahead and name this one to color. And we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. And I'm going to use mask on this layer and hold the control key down and drag out. This is mask. If I move the slider, the mask is gone when I move it. If you want the mask to come back, as you can see when I hover over this third layer, it's showing that it has mask and the other two are empty. If we want it back on, we'll have to turn the record back on. As you can see, we got these layers here. These are the layer list. If I select up here at the bump here and I move it to the negative, it goes to -1. If I bring it to the positive, it goes to number 1. I have this slider down here. It does the same thing, but it has a little bit more to it. This will max out at number 5 to the positive and -5. So this has a little bit more to it, intensity to it. So we have this option here. It just selects down the list. So when the top one here is selected, it's just going to keep on selecting down when I keep on clicking this arrow. And vice versa. I'm just only selecting up and selecting down. Of course, we're on the mask layer, so we'll rename that to mask and press enter. Now if I want to bring the mask up a layer, we're going to move it up. I want to move it above the color, so I'll move it up, and you see it's now the second one. Now if I want it to the top layer, move it up past the bump layer, then it moves it up, or we can move it back down as we want. Another thing we can do is if this list gets really long and you are selecting the select up and you want to, let's say, select all the way down at the bottom really quick, if this list is real long and you have to scroll, you can just hold the shift key and select all the way to the bottom, or hold the shift key and it selects all the way to the top. And basically these arrows here, when you selected them, it's no different than coming over here and select them right here by hand. Let's go ahead and hide some of this stuff right here. And we have this option here that's called Invert. I'm going to be selecting the bump layer, make sure I'm on this one here, and whatever is this layer is made out of, which is the shape, this will invert it. So everything that was pushed out gets pushed back in or sucked back in, and vice versa. This is the same way with color. We can invert color. Let's crank this up so we can see the color real good. This will invert the color. We're going to select the mask here. We're not going to need that layer, so we're going to press the delete button here. And we got this option here called duplicate. All this does is duplicate the layer that we are on. We're on the color layer, and we're going to duplicate it. And we'll just turn this one off, come down to the new one that duplicated, and you can see that this is the duplicated one. We'll go ahead and delete that, don't need that one. We'll turn this one back on. So we're going to go into the next step. We have two buttons down here, the split layer and the merge down. They're both grayed out. We're going to start with the merge down. Well, we need to merge down, and there's no layer below here that we can merge down, so we need to come up above here, and we are going to merge this layer down. We're going to merge the bump layer into the color layer, so we're going to merge down. Now they are as one. Now we have this option right here called split layers. So if I split this layer, as you can see, we got new names. This one down here to the very far right, it says A shape. Well, anything that had the word shape to it, we knew this was the bump layer. So it's probably best that we rename this one here back to bump. And I knew this layer here, which is the opposite one, was the color, so we better rename this one back to color. I'll be going over the bake all. Before I do this, I'll create a new layer here, and we'll name this one bump 2, and I'm going to be making a bump, just say right here. So I need to find which layer that I want to, I'm going to be doing the bake all, which will bake all of these layers together. I'm going to select this bump here, which was the front one and the two side ones. You can see right here. I'm going to come down here to morph target, store the morph target, and this little example, I'll just turn this off. And what's going to happen is we're going to bake this bump and this poly painting all into one, and the layers will be removed. So we'll bake off, and then you can see what happened. But since I stored the morph target on this one here, we can actually come back here and go to switch and bring that back. This is pretty handy with the morph brush. Let's go ahead and switch that back. And if we come over here and we'll go M for morph and go down the morph brush, if I want to bring back just that one bump in a certain area, see if I switch it, I'll show you once again. We got the bump in the front and the one on the side. Maybe I just want to do the one in the front. So we can use that morph brush and just bring back that one right here, and you get something like that. I have a new project here, and I'm in subdivision 3 here, S divide 3, and I'm going to show you how to edit the mesh in certain subdivision levels. We're going to come over here and create a new layer, and we're going to create a bump on subdivision 3, so we'll drag out here, and this is going to be our first bump. Now instead of pressing unrecord, what we're going to do is we're going to drop this down to another level that we want to work on. And if I want to draw a bump here on the sides, now you can see I made the bump on subdivision 1 here on the sides and number 3 on the front. So once I bring the slider back up to 3, then once I move this slider, you'll see both the bumps will be affected as I move the slider. We have the outer and the inner. And if you recall right, the front bump was made with subdivision 3 and the sides were made with subdivision 1. Be going over the import MDD animation data and the speed factor slider that's grayed out right now. I'm not going to show you how to make the MDD file, not in this video tutorial. You can find it in my other video tutorial. This can be made in ZBrush. This can also be made in other applications. A little brief overview is what is MDD animation data? Well, what it does, it bakes the motion on vertices. So basically, this mesh was brought in from another package, and it has motion that is assigned to these vertices. So what's good about this is this does not really need any kind of skinning or boning for this to have any kind of motion, because it moves the mesh around by the vertices. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go into the movie palette here, and I'm going to go to the timeline and show. Now this is a brief overview here, so really don't pay attention to this area if you don't need to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe here and one here, and activate the camera just a little bit. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to press import. Before I do this, I'm going to import the MDD, and you'll see in just a second I'll have another layer here. So we'll import this. Now this is the motion file, and it's assigned directly only for this mesh here. So this will only work for this mesh, and press open. Then we get something like this. So let me set this back here, and I'm going to set a keyframe here, and we'll get something like this. Let me bring everything back into view, and so we can kind of see what's going on here. So I'll bring this back. I'm going to hold the control key, shift key, and so we can start the animation. And you can see how everything's just moving around. It does not need any kind of rigging or any kind of bones to it. Wait till it finishes up here. Now when I'll bring this back somewhere, I don't know, about halfway, and I can also adjust this slider to bring it way out like this, and we'll set a keyframe here. We'll start from the beginning, control key, shift key, start the animation. Now when it gets about in the middle, it will start pulling back out. So I'll go ahead and we'll just remove that one right here. We'll just drag that off. Let me zoom that back and drag that off one more time. There we go. So basically, I'm going to play it one more time so we can check out the speed, because we're going to be going over the speed slider factor here in just a second, so you can do a little comparison. And it's about finished. And I'll just crank this up a little bit. I don't want to get too much. And I'll bring it back here. Control shift click to play it. And you can see it's really just too fast. And I'll let it finish up and bring it back down a little bit slower. Looks good enough, and one more time. This is extremely slow, so you can see how the speed factor works by adjusting it. Very simple to understand, and it's actually pretty slow, so once it finishes, then this will be the end right here. I'll be going over this Geometry HD here. This will allow you to sculpture in high definition without having to subdivide the whole model. So if we come up to the geometry up here and we look at the subdivision level, this one has subdivision level 5 at the highest. If we move this slider, this divide HD button becomes inactive. So keep that in mind, it needs to be at the highest. Now kind of the old way, well not actually the old way, the other way was if you wanted to get fine detail, you had to subdivide the whole model. I'm going to switch over here and show you a little example. If I used to drag out, as you can see the tip of the arrow around the edges is really jagged. Control Z that. Then we're going to divide this a couple times. Then when I bring it out, then you can see it's not jagged. Now I'm having to subdivide this whole model, which is not a problem because ZBrush can handle a lot of polygons, and actually a couple million way that I'm sculpturing this way. With the HD sculpturing, you can get into the billions. I personally never tried it, but to get up in the billions, but I heard you can. So let's Control Z that. Now when you start sculpturing in HD, it's recommended that you do not start your mesh off any higher than 1.5 million polygons. If you don't know how many polygons you got, you can look at the active points up here, and you can put your cursor over here and you can see the polys and all this to get your count. So let's say example, I don't want to go any higher than 1.5. I want to tone this down. Let's say this cube has 6 million polygons and I need to tone it down. Well, I would move this slider and tone it down, but it's going to deactivate the HD. So let's say I moved it down to number 5, and I was actually, it was saying I had 1 million polygons right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the high. Anything above 5 will be deleted, and 5 will become our highest. And when I did this, now we have the subdivision for the HD button active again. Even though that it doesn't say 1 million, we're going to pretend it does. I typically wouldn't go this low, but for this demonstration I have to go low so you can kind of see how this works in the video. So once again, when I drag out, we get all this jagginess. So I'm going to sculpture in the high definition, and I'm going to divide this a few times. And before I do this, if you look at the points up here, you'll notice the top ones will not change. I'm really not actually dividing the mesh, and the bottom ones, the bottom points will change. And I'll click that to number 4. Now when I bring my cursor over this area right here, this is where we're going to be sculpturing in high definition when we press the A key. And when I press the A key on the keyboard, this gives us an area that is going to be the high definition. So basically it's trying to say, hey, this is where all the polygons at, and this is where you sculpture at. Anything in the dark area, you are not going to be sculpturing in HD. And you can see now my active points is up here changing. It's saying this regional area's got almost 3 million right here. So now when I drag this out, we do not get this jaggedness around the edges. I'm going to press the A key again and bring this back. Now it brings us back to the normal state where we get this jaggedness. This is basically the way it works. The thing not to do is to come over here and press Sculpture HD and think that you are sculptured in HD, because all this does is preview your model in high definition. So when I select here, it's just only going to preview that. Now if I wiggle this a little bit, it brings back all the jaggedness here. Now I'm going to mimic kind of the exact same thing what this button does, is if my cursor is off to the side of the mesh, not on it, and I press the A key, this basically just previews it. So I'm going to turn it to the side here. Then I'm going to go ahead and divide this again. I'll bring my cursor over here and press the A key. As you notice, the circle is getting smaller. Press the A key. I'll divide that again. Come over here, press the A key. I'm not doing any sculpture right now. I'm just showing you that the regional area is getting smaller because actually I'm subdividing it, and it's trying to say, hey, the regional area is getting smaller because you're adding more polygons. If you want to increase this, you can go to the preference, and then you can come down to the mem here and HD preview max poly. Okay, be very careful about messing with this and kind of experiment with it, because too high could cause you to crash. Let's bring this back over here. So we'll go ahead and press the A key again, bring it back out, and we got this for the region here. All it does is switches the circle one to a square. Press A key, press A key again. Notice the size of the square here, and if I tone it down a little bit, press A key, and you can see now the regional area is getting larger. I had paused the video for a second, so if you see any new changes, that's why. I'm not going to get into theory why things work, but that would just make it more confusing. But for this little demonstration, I didn't know if I went over it. We're going to keep an eye on the active point up here. This is the mesh, and then we got the total points here. Basically, it's showing the total points as if it was being previewed in high definition mode. Once again, if I come over here, we'll keep an eye on the top one here, and I press the A key on the keyboard, then it'll show this area that I'm working in as how many active points are in here. Now if I press the A key again and give it a second, then I go ahead and crank this up, and come over and press the A key again, that our region will be a lot smaller. So like I said, not getting into whole detail why this works, but just keep note of how this region kind of works. So let me go ahead and zoom this in. Let's say HD is really good for zooming into areas that you want to put a lot of detail in. And actually I brought in a brush here. It's got some text on here, and we're going to go ahead and actually I'm going to scale this up a little bit bigger. So make sure that you can see it in the video. And I'm going to select in this area here and drag out and let go. Now when I go ahead and bring this back, well, you can see before I bring it back, it looks pretty normal. It looks you can see the text very good. So we'll scale this back, and if we was kind of viewing this at normal size, you can see that you can't probably read the text from there. So this is good if you want to get into some really close in detail work, as you can see right there. As you recall, when I scaled this up and got into a closer area, this is where the geometry HD sculpture comes in handy, and it has a little bit more advantage, and this is where the power comes in, because typically we might have a hard time doing this the traditional subdivision way. So this is where it comes in handy. If you want to kind of see the comparison here of how this would really look, I would just go ahead and I'm going to press the A key to deselect all this right here for right now, and we get this little lumpy bump here. I'll move my cursor over to the right, and we'll press the A key again. Then you can see the geometry Text over here is showing in high definition, and the one over here on the left is showing the original subdivision level. So once again, I'll kind of scale that up a little bit and you can kind of see. This is a fresh start here, so these are the steps. We'll go over to the geometry. Make sure that our geometry is no higher than 1.5 million polygons. Once that's done, we'll come down to the geometry HD. We'll divide this a couple times to our likings. And we'll bring our cursor over the center. Press the A key. And we'll sculpture in this region here. And that's it. It's pretty simple. It's really not that hard to understand. So now that we got the understanding about this part, what else can we do with this HD? Well, we can also turn the transparency on. I'll need to turn this a little bit here, and I may need to make sure my display double sides on. And you can see I can also sculpture through the back side. So I'm going to sculpture on the back side of this one here, and I'll bring one out like this. Now you can see that it's my ZAD's on and it's bringing it towards me. When I turn it around, it'll be sunk in. And I'll Z-sub it this way, and you can kind of see how that works. Now you can see my region area. It's kind of going all over the place on the side of the cube. We can isolate some of them areas just a little bit by just go ahead and Control Shift click, and we're going to hide some of this area that we want to isolate. Let me get some smooth side here, and I'll bring this around. As you see, we got some hidden right there. Come over here, press A key, and then you can see how it's kind of isolating some of the areas. Need to turn the double side back on. So I'm at the back side, and I want to sculpture on the other side. And you can kind of see how this is working right here. Turn the ZAD on. So by me isolating this area right here, this is our region area. This was allowing me to sculpture from both sides of the mesh, and wherever it's transparent at does not get affected. There's the back side and the front side. Since HD was one method of bringing in some extra geometry, I'm going to show you another method. This is something I do not use all the time, the geometry HD. Most common one I use is the geometry here with the subdivision by dividing it. This is basically what I use most of all the time. If we open up the subtools, we can see that we only have one subtool, and I'm going to start dividing this until it maxes out. And we're at 8, we're going to 9, and we're looking at this little S divide here. It's going up to 9 here in just a second. And we're at 9, and I'm going to divide it one more time, and I'm getting this little error. I'm not going to read the whole error, but it's trying to tell me that I can, there's a way that I can fix this by tweaking it and through the preferences, but I'm not going to do that. It's telling me, hey, you can't go any higher, and that's it. It's showing me my total points is maxed out at a little over 6 million. So what do? Well, what I can do is I can split this up through the subtools. So I'll move everything down to subdivision 1, come over here and we're going to use group split, and we are going to separate these into pieces. So now we got this, but we still have all the the same amount of points. So let's go ahead and those demonstration, we'll select them all to high. And remember, this is the 6 million is the total amount of points of all 4 subtools. And remember, we could not get any more. It would give me the error at number 9. Now if I come down here, I am only on this selected piece right here, and if I divide this and give it a second, we're at a little over 1.5 million, and this will change in a second, and the bottom one, total amount of points, will change also. So the top one is for the active tool, what we're seeing, and the bottom one is for all 4 of these tools all together. So that has changed. Now I will be able to go through each one of these and subdivide this and get a lot more subdivision levels. So this is just another way that you can bring in a lot more subdivision levels by kind of splitting this up. I'll be coming over here to the preview. This previews this tool icon right here, and it's previewing this is how it's orientated and how it's going to be brought in when I drag it in right here. Then we'll go into edit mode, and we'll hold the shift key so it locks in the direct axes here. And I'm gonna go ahead and there's a lime green axis line here. Can't see it very well, so we'll go to draw and we'll increase the axis a little bit. And basically, when most of a 3D object comes into an application, it comes in at the center of the object. This is basically where the pivot point's at. So if I want to adjust this, I'll get into that in just a second, but let's go over a few functions. If we come in here and select and move around, we can rotate this plane around. If we want to hide this, we can come up to the upper right hand corner and hide it and click it to show it. Upper left hand corner, we can get it to start spinning. You can drag it and shove a little bit to make it spin a little bit more, and you can move it the other direction. And when it's spinning, and you can come back over here and press the left side again, this will stop spinning, and it's orientated facing the way it's supposed to come in to the application. If I want to, for some reason, adjust this pivot point or this axis at, there's this red crosshair in the middle at the tip of the cone. As you see, it's at the tip of the cone here, but actually it's we go down in a straight line back, it's right here at the lime green y-axis. So if I hold the shift key and snap, and we'll snap it directly in that axis, and it's right here. This is where that red crosshair is at. Now I can go ahead and grab this crosshair and grab it, hold the shift key, and I'm going to get it pretty close to the end, but not way off the end. And you can see that it moved over there. Not quite to the end, but close enough. If this is something I like, I can press store. The reason why it moved around is because I actually had this, when I first brought it out, I end up switching it. So if this makes sense to you, it's basically facing this direction. Now I can control in this, and when I bring it out, it's coming out to the side. This is not what I want. Once again, if you move this around and you click the left hand corner, it's always going to give you the indication which way it's going to face. So if I move it around a little bit again, like this, and click this, so it locks, that's the way it's going to face. This is not what I want. I want the back half like this, but I need it facing towards me. So I'm going to hold the shift key and until it snaps. Then I'm going to press store, and it's pointing directly towards me. So when I bring it in, it's facing towards me. Hold the shift key till it snaps. and you can see I still have this back half exactly where I want it, because I'm going to be using this here in just a second. As you can see, this new pivot point's way to the back. Alright, just because I stored it there. So we'll bring this all back. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch this to a plane here to show you this little demonstration. And I'm going to open up the palette here, and we're going to move the material for right now, and we'll move this brush over to the side, and we're going to select this and M for mesh insert, and we'll select here, and we go down to the modifier, mesh insert, and we're going to select that arrow. When we'll go off the symmetry here by pressing X key, and when I drag this out and I tip it to the side, you can see where it's going to stop when I insert this on this flat plane right here where I had the new pivot point. So this is pretty handy. So if I was to make a even smaller one, it's going to stop the same back half right here. Very handy, and it will work in all directions from this one here. Sphere, make polymesh 3D. We still have this active, so as you can see, it orients in all directions. And it won't sink any further into that mesh. At the back of it. Now you can move it back and forth like this, and you can kind of get all kinds of effects like that, but you can see how this is working. Pause the video for just a second, but let's go ahead and kind of examine this real quick. As you can see, on the arrow where I made at the end of the arrow the new axis for the pivot point, if we go to display here and turn on the double-sided, we're going to hold the Control and Shift key, drag, Alt key, get this red one, and we're going to take a look back here. As you can see how it doesn't kind of insert any further than the new pivot point that I made. This white one that I have right here looks like it's a little bit further, and that's because the way I was dragging on it back and forth when I was making something. So basically, when I was pulling out, I was pulling back, and it was making this arrow even skinnier. And you can drag it back and forth, and it was kind of making it a little bit further in